Hello, everybody, and welcome to Kayfabe with Keaton. Today, I'm bringing on professional wrestling legend, possibly the biggest episode ever on Kayfabe with Keaton. I'm bringing on the legendary PJ Black, most known for his time as Justin Gabriel in WWE. He's reinvented himself on the Indies, and that's why I became a big fan of him. He's been able to reinvent himself after being in WWE. So let's bring him in.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Hey man, thank you so much for having me. I know we've been playing phone tag for quite a while. We've been trying to make this happen, and we finally get to do it. So excited!
Yeah, I'm absolutely honored to have you on today. So how's your day going today?
Oh, fantastic! I just got back from the gym, had a little swim. Just getting ready for this beautiful sunny day in California.
And what are you doing over in California? What are you at a wrestling show?
No, I actually live in Hollywood now.
Okay. So I want to start from the start. Obviously, you've had quite an incredible career, and especially when you started wrestling, it's not like how most people would have started. So, talk me through your very first memory of seeing professional wrestling.
All right, wow. My dad was a professional wrestler and a promoter. My granddad was a boxing promoter. So when I was a young kid, I started going to boxing shows and kickboxing shows, and eventually wrestling, and I just fell in love with it. I remember the first time I seen a WWE or WWF event at that time. They aired WrestleMania 4, only the main event on our local cable television, and I already before that decided that I was going to be a pro wrestler. But when I saw that, I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And I remember telling all my family that this is what I'm going to do, and everyone was just like, okay, yeah, whatever. Like nobody from South Africa has ever really made it on the big stage. And I was like, perfect, then I'll be the first, right? And yeah, I had to fast forward years later. It took me 10 years to prove everybody that that's what I did. But yeah, wow, amazing memories just watching my dad wrestle when I grew up. When I was, I think, 12 or 13, I was at the show and they didn't have a referee. So they were like, hey, you know how this stuff works, right? You can count to 3, you can count to 10, just get in there and do it. And I was so nervous. I was like, just like a young teenager. And then, once I got in the ring, it just felt so natural, and like seeing how the magic happened. And I was like, yep, this is definitely what I want to do one day.
Yeah, and that kind of with I saw this, from The Rock while watching Young Rock. A lot of his family didn't want him to get into wrestling because they experienced that kind of pain. But your family were just sort of like, yeah, okay, do whatever you want, really.
Yeah, he was very cool about it, and he obviously he's been doing it for his whole life, so he could see like a little bit of talent. But like we're always biased with our own friends and kids. He was like, okay, cool, you're talented. But he laid out a plan for me. He's like, look, you're gonna go get famous somewhere. Like we had all his plans. He set me up to go wrestle in New Japan, Mexico City. Like he had his whole plan, and then I was gonna come back and then take over his promotion. That was his plan. But unfortunately, in '99, he passed away, so none of that came to fruition. So I was just like, damn, what do I do now? And I couldn't get a visa to go to Japan or Mexico because I have a South African passport. The only visa I can get anywhere out of the country was to the UK. So I ended up going to Scotland for like 6 months, and then I ended up living in London for like 4 or 5 years almost. Went to college there, and then started wrestling for a promotion there called what was it called, FWA at the time. They were pretty big in the early 2000s. Yeah, and that just sparked my love for wrestling again. I kind of like lost it because my dad passed. That he was my best friend. We did all that stuff together. My first match was against him. We were a tag team. Like all those memories were just like abruptly taken away from me. So I was like, oh, I don't want anything to do with that. But then, once I traveled through Europe and I started training again at the FWA Academy down in Portsmouth, that it reignited that passion. It's something that you cannot ever get rid of. It's there. It's somewhere inside my DNA. And I was like, all right, let me see what I can do here. And then I ended up going back to South Africa after they kicked me out after 5 years. And at the time, a little wrestling promotion, they had a TV show. So I worked on that TV show full time. And that's where I got a lot of footage and a lot of good experience. And, I sent those tapes, back in the day, to WWE, and they picked me up from that.
Yeah, and that's quite an incredible career. Obviously after that, you found a love for traveling and you traveled around the place, even for wrestling, which is really cool. But talk about your early days when you mentioned your love for wrestling, and the spark did go away, but you can never get rid of it. I've only obviously you know this way more than I do, but I've had 4 matches and I understand what it's like. Yeah, it's addictive. You want to get back in there and wrestle again, take more bumps. So obviously that spark was always with you. So when you started wrestling with your dad, what was the main thing he taught you that you still carry on to this day?
Oh wow, so many little things, like I mean, some people would call it politics or
Mm.
like how to play the game, because like this is art, this is entertainment, right? It's not like a real sport where you can see like, hey, that guy's definitely the best baseball player, that guy's definitely the best rugby player in the world, right? There's no way in
Yeah,
wrestling to see that, right? It's the power of the pen who writes the story that makes you look good, right? And if you get to work your way up in a company where you get the power to write your own stuff, that's when you become a star, essentially, right? So early days. So I started when I was 15 years old. I had my first match when I was 16 years old. At the time, it was still really hard to break into the business. They had all these rules and laws and regulations. You couldn't be a professional athlete if you're under 18 years old. So I had to fake it, get a fake ID. I had to go work for the other company, my dad's opposition, because like my dad wouldn't let me. He would let me referee matches for his company, but I wrestled under a mask with a long wig for the other company. And my dad was like, "I know that's you," and I was like, "Yeah, well, what are you gonna do about it?"
that's really
um,
good.
yeah, and I was on the road full time, and I couldn't tell anybody at school because it was illegal. Like I couldn't. Every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 1996 and 7, I wrestled every Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I never had any days off. I missed so much parties and school work and stuff, and I couldn't tell anybody. Like, I'd get to school on Monday and I was full of glitter and tan and like paint. Like,
Yeah,
and the kids were like, "What the hell are you doing this weekend?" And I was like, don't worry about it. And I got really good, really quick in those 2 years, because I was doing minimum 3 matches a week. And as you know, in anything in life, and especially in wrestling, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And yeah, that was some of my most fond memories. And then I was going to drop out of school and just do it full time. And my dad was like, "Okay, you can drop out of school, but then you have to pay rent living with me." So I was like, "Man, I don't want to pay rent yet. I just bought a $2,000 pair of wrestling boots. How am I going to afford rent?" uh, and so I was like, "Okay, I'll stay in school." I made him that promise. And then 2 weeks, my final exams in matric, and that's when he passed. And I was like, just devastated. I couldn't do anything, man. Like, it really sucked, but I was like, you know what? I promised him to do this, and I'm going to do it. And I finished school, and don't take advice from me, but I just think school was the biggest waste of time ever. Um, especially if you know at a young age what you want to do. Most
yeah,
kids don't, and that's why I guess you go to school. And uh, but yeah, that was my early memories. Not very conventional, very different to most people. But yeah, I treasure those memories the most. Like just being on the road. And it wasn't like shows in my town. Like I lived in my dad lived in Johannesburg, my mom lived in Cape Town. So I had to, like, Friday, my coach used to come pick me up at school. We used to drive to like Bloemfontein, which is like 6 hours away, do the match there, drive straight to Durban, which is another like 6-7 hours away. Sometimes we'll drive to Cape Town, which is a 12-hour drive, just to do the match and then get straight back. I had to get back to Johannesburg to school, so it was a lot of time spent on the road. And this was like before YouTube was a thing, so I couldn't like Google things, and like I had
yeah.
VHS tapes, and I would get so excited when I get these tapes from Japan. I'd go study it, and I had a wrestling ring in my backyard, so I'd study the tape upstairs and then run downstairs and try these moves out, and I'd run upstairs to watch the tape. It's so much easier these days where I can just go with my phone and like in the ring, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, cool, let me do that."
Yeah, that's a really good story as well. And when you mentioned there, you started wrestling. In my opinion, I believe that even starting at a young age is always an advantage. If you want to do something like this, you don't want to wait till later. Especially even now people have discovered kids are doing amateur wrestling, which can be a lot harder and a lot worse on your body than professional wrestling. In some areas, obviously, in some areas, professional wrestling can be hard, but I don't think people understand that it's not all about just taking bumps in wrestling. There's so much more. Like there's character work the kids could be working on. There's so much more than just taking bumps. So starting at a young age was obviously a big advantage.
Oh yeah, definitely. And like anything in life, right? Like the more work you put into something, And when you're young, you just pick up things quicker, and you also have less fear, right? You don't really care about breaking bones because you know you're gonna heal, and you don't really care about. It's not like you don't care. I think maybe some when we're kids we just what's the word, and just not delusional. What's the word where you don't really think that far ahead. You just like,
Yeah, I know
oh,
what you mean.
I sprained my
Right.
ankle. I'm like, oh, it'll heal. Like you don't really think like that far ahead, which is a blessing and a curse in a way, and that like anything in life, like the younger you start and the more work you put into it, the better you will become at it. And and when we're young, we're at that stage, like especially when you're like between like 10, like young teenager, right? That's when certain things stick with you, and like, oh wow, I really like playing baseball, or I really like playing rugby or wrestling. For me, like there was all three of those for me, but like I had to eventually choose. And when I was 18, I did my first international trip, and I got kicked off the rugby team. So I was like, that's when I decided that for the third time in my life, I was like, okay, this is definitely what I have to do. This is just yet another confirmation that instead of being a rugby player, I was going to be a wrestler one day.
Yeah, and even now, that a lot of people have become a bit more accepting of it. I think it's really cool. That the kids are able to start wrestling and they are able to kind of achieve their dreams at this age. I know for me, right now at my age, I'm just all wrestling really. There's nothing really else that I'm interested in. I'm just like in there wanting to get in the ring more and more. Wanting to do more matches. So yeah, it is in my opinion, it is really good, especially when you're young. You would have that kind of passion.
Yeah, no, totally. And you're at the right. You also have not only do you have that passion, you have this entrepreneurial mindset, which that's why you started this podcast, right? So you get to create a business, and you get to pick other people who came before you's brain, which is a brilliant idea, by the way. Big props for that. A lot of people won't even like think about that. They'll just be so set on one thing. And that's a little bit of advice that I can give somebody. I knew that was what I was going to do, but like what would have happened if I broke my leg or had a kneecap replacement very young and I couldn't do it anymore, so that's why I went to college. I got my education. It made my mom very happy because she's like, oh, you'll never make money in wrestling. I remember the first time she's ever seen me live was at WrestleMania, and I remember showing her my check. I was like, hey, remember you said I'll never make any money? Look at this. She was very stoked. Since that day, she became like the biggest fan. Like at that time, social media was a big thing too. So every day she was on social media, she would know where I was going to be before I was there. She's like, oh, you're wrestling this guy this weekend. That's so cool. So like parents eventually come around, but most parents want to tell their kids what to do, or they want to push them in a certain direction. And, like everybody's different. I mean, for some people that would work, but for some parents, if you just kind of let your kids go and do whatever they want to do, they'll find their passion and they'll find their way in life, And I know it's a kind of like shitty advice, but that's a path that I followed.
Yeah, and I'm just going to bring in some of our comments here before we get into more of this. I'm going to bring in some of our comments from our fans. So, Manny Molly says, "Whoa, Keaton, what a cool guest. Justin Gabriel is a true legend." And then TZS video says, Dermot, tell us some of your most darn moments that gave you the biggest buzz, please.
Oh wow, there's so many of that. Inside of the ring or outside of the ring? Let's do both. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of people know that I'm a base jumper, skydiver. I fly paragliders. I fly anything with the wing. I've done some crazy jumps. I've done halo jumps where I've jumped from 40,000 feet with the military. I've jumped some of the most dangerous cliffs in Italy, Norway, all over the world. I broke my legs twice doing that. Lost half of my finger doing that. Almost drowned surfing big waves. Funny story, I'll tell you a Vince story on that later. About all these crazy things, but like in the ring, I think like I took a bump off the cage of Hell in a Cell once. Cena threw me off.
Yeah.
It really sucked because the cameras didn't even get a good shot of it. It felt like I did that for nothing, and I remember coughing blood for like 2 days.
Like mankind.
Yeah, it was horrible. But like one of the most difficult things I did that gave me the biggest rush was I think it was Money in the Bank 11 or maybe 12 when I did that. I did the 450 onto Kane from that ladder in the corner. That was incredibly difficult, and it didn't even look as cool or as hard as it didn't look as hard as it was. It was super hard, but like it just gave me like the biggest rush. I mean, you're a wrestler, right? We work for pop sometimes. Yeah. It just drives you, even if you're injured or tired or whatever. That it kind of like that energy that drives you, and I could just remember like the adrenaline rushing through my body, and I was just like, just hooked for life.
Yeah, and I think our kind of different wrestling styles are quite different. For me, I wouldn't really be jumping off the top. I've done it before, but I wouldn't normally be jumping off the top rope much. For my way of getting the pop, I'm a face, so I think this always works. Is if your opponent offers you a handshake, do you want to accept the handshake? You could do the handshake, you get pulled into the headlock, or they attack you maybe in the gutter somehow. But obviously you're quite daring in the ring, and I even see some of your stuff. You've done some crazy stuff. And when you mentioned, or you probably know what I'm going to ask you now, but when you mentioned, or jumping off planes and stuff like that, obviously a very bad injury happened to you. So can you talk us through that? When you were skydiving.
Yeah. I mean, skydiving is pretty safe. Many people don't realize that. It sounds very like dangerous, but it's not. It's a very controlled sport. Base jumping is where it gets rough, right? Because it's not an actual sport. There's not like a base jumping store you can go and buy gear. You have to find somebody that will teach you how to manipulate gear. There's a few companies now that sell gear and stuff like that, but it's not like a regulated sport like skydiving, where you have to go get a license. You got to go to like this the FCC, whatever, like the pilot schools, the AFF, whatever it is. Like, it's very regulated. It's just BASE is an acronym for building, antenna, span, like a bridge, and earth. Those are the 4 fixed objects that we jump from. And that was when I broke my leg once. I jumped this building in Johannesburg. It's one of the most famous buildings in Johannesburg. You can see it from anywhere in the city. And my parachute opened at an angle, and I kept hitting the building like just over and over and over and over. I cannot even believe that I didn't go through the window somewhere. It was like early in the morning, like 6 a.m. too. That's when it's really quiet. I just remember like seeing this lady through the window. She was like eating her breakfast, and her face was like, ah. Yeah, that kind of like stuck with me all the way to the hospital. But somehow I survived that, healed up, and then 6 months later, I did the same thing in the same area too, not the same building, but the same area. Maybe that area was cursed, and I broke both my legs. And I was like, Wade Barrett says it to me all the time. He's like, man, why do you do crazier things outside of the ring than you do inside of the ring? Like you're legit like crazy. But I always took that as a compliment, really.
And doing that kind of thing, would you say that helped you a lot with wrestling?
I wouldn't say like it helped me in wrestling, but it like helped me in life. Before that, I was just, people think base jumpers are just these crazy yahoos that just jump off stuff, but there's a lot of planning that goes into that. Like I had to learn weather patterns. I had to learn how to manipulate my own gear, how to check certain things, how to do things legally. And if it wasn't legal, I had to learn how to pick locks, because a lot of it is not legal, unfortunately. Like I had to learn a bunch of skills, and like one of the most important things I learned was just how to meditate, how just to sit with your own thoughts, which sounds really weird. Like if you're young, I was always very anti it and against all that kind of stuff. But if you think about it, like base jumping is like a forced meditation. You're standing on the ledge, you're about to jump, and there's just like nothing else. That's what meditation is just getting rid of all those thoughts. And people always think like, oh, I cannot do it because I cannot get rid of all my thoughts. But that's like walking into the gym and thinking you're going to bench press 500 pounds your first day. It takes work. You have to get there. For years, training right, eating right. It's the same with meditation. You have to do these little exercises, and you train to get to that, where you get into the theta. That's the sweet spot of meditation. But I felt like base jumping put me in theta on the spot. Like I don't have to do any breathing exercises or thinking or anything, right? Because you're standing on the ledge and your mind is clear. Like you're not thinking about the bills you have to pay or the fight you had with your girlfriend or spouse, or you're not thinking about anything. You're just thinking about, okay, I got to survive this, right? So for me, it was like a forced meditation, and that's how I got into like the spiritual stuff, I guess, in real life. So it taught me a lot of lessons in that, and I meditate every single day. It made a massive change in my life. And, if I can ever just give people advice in life, that's the one thing I say, just learn how to meditate. And you're not going to get it right the first go. You're not going to walk into the gym and bench 500 pounds, right? You're going to have to work to get there. It's going to take time, and it sucks. Just like anything that's boring, if you have to put time into it, right? It sucks. Like who wants to do that? I don't want to do that, but it'll change your life on so many levels. So I highly, highly encourage people, especially if you take care of your body. You go to the gym, right? If you're a wrestler, so you're going to have to be in the gym, start eating healthy body, healthy mind. You want to get as many meditation techniques as you can. Learn about that. But I'm rambling on. That's not what the podcast here is about.
No, but I do find stuff like that quite interesting, you know. And even though it's not what the podcast is about, there is a lot of stuff like that you would do in wrestling. You know, you do forget about a lot of that stuff in wrestling. But where do you want to go to from this is you probably don't really get asked about this, but when you're on the independent scene near the start, you know, with your dad and stuff, you've probably seen, you know, that your dad probably didn't get the recognition that he deserved. When people go to independent wrestling shows, you know this yourself, to see the ring and to see that's it, to see the ring and the wrestlers, but they don't see the hours of traveling, and they don't know that independent wrestlers don't get paid very much. So that's why I started up my other podcast. It's called Indie Wrestling Uncut. So on my episode before that, I got Killer Cross on, talking about being released from WWE and going back to the indies. So it's all kind of to show the grind of independent wrestling. And so, do you have any stories where you realized that your dad maybe didn't get enough recognition as he should have, or in independent wrestling? What was that kind of grind like for you? You know, starting off.
Yeah, so two things here. So my dad was actually one of the most famous people in South Africa. Like many people don't know this, you know, because he was a famous businessman. He had national colors in like 9 different sports. Because of in 1981, that's when I was born. He was going to go to the Olympic Games because the Russian guy that won the gold medal, he actually beat him at the World Games. You know, so the whole team was very excited. But during that era, South Africa was boycotted from all international sports, so my dad couldn't go, and he was really, really upset. You know, because that's what he did. He was an athlete, so that's how he got into pro wrestling, by the way. Because he was like, I don't have to ask anybody for permission. There's no board, none of that. So he was an incredibly successful businessman, and everybody knew that he was a wrestler too, you know, so it kind of like crossed over. Coming back to the indie question, when I started wrestling, you know, like I knew WWE or wrestling on TV would give you a name and you'd make more money. But for me, wrestling is like always an art. I never really did it for money, right? I love the art of it, like just creating the story and like the pops and like, you know, everything that goes around that excitement you get when your music hits. So I was always wanted to work the indies, you know, and I tried for years and years and years. Obviously before WWE, I did the indies in South Africa and all over Europe and stuff. But I really wanted to work the indies in the US, you know, like watching like early days of ROH and the early days of TNA and stuff like that. That just like excited me. It was just a different style of wrestling. But I never had that opportunity. So that's one of the main reasons I quit WWE. I was like, cool, now I can go to the indies. At least I have a little bit of a name. And now I can get to do the matches that I want, you know. And I remember my first year, I got to do all my dream matches in like 6 months. You know, one of my first matches was against AJ Styles in Brooklyn, New York, and I was just so excited. You know, like I was just so freaking excited. It was awesome. What a cool match too. Like one of my favorites, and we didn't even plan anything. We just like he was a New Japan heavyweight champ at the time too, so he couldn't do the job. I was supposed to go over, but he won the belt like 2 days before, so he was like, oh, we got to change the finish. But I didn't care about that. I just cared about being in the ring with him. You know, he's an all-time great. He'll go down in history as one of the greats, and I can tell you many stories about that too, how I kind of like inspired him and helped him to get to the Fed, I guess, for lack of a better term. But yeah, I was super excited about the indies. I love it because you can do things that you want to do, right? And when you work for a big company, it's awesome, but you have to kind of, if you're not one of the top guys, you have to follow the script. You have to do these shitty 3-minute matches, and you have to do a lot of things that you don't really want to do. And for a lot of people, that's okay because you have a family to provide for, so you're just doing your job. But I wanted more than that, and that's actually what Vince said to me when I left. He goes, look, I know what you want to do, so why don't you just go do that, and then, you know, maybe one day come back. And I was like, yeah, okay, I know you don't really mean that, but whatever. But thank you for seeing that. And yeah, my first year, even the 2 years, I was so excited on the indies. I was having so much fun that I got offered contracts left and right, and I just said no. I was just like, this is way too much fun. I remember the first season of Lucha Underground actually offered me a massive Yes, but I turned it down because I was like, I've never heard of this company. Who's this guy? Who are these guys? I mean, I knew everybody that worked there, but I was like, you guys didn't even have a deal. Like, what? Like, how are you going to pay me this amount of money to do this? And I said no. And I remember telling them, I remember it was the 27th of October, and I said, why don't you call me next year and see where I'm at in life? I was so arrogant. And they did. A year later, right, they call me, and obviously at this time I've seen season 1 of Lucha Underground on TV, and I was like, wow, mind blown. I was like, how did I say no to this? This is amazing. But I was having so much fun on the indies. And so I told him, like, when I started working there, I was like, look, I still want to take my independent bookings and do all this stuff. And they said, fine. They wrote that into the contract. So I was like, man, I'm double dipping now. I'm under contract and I get to work at indies. So I was like, that was the most fun time in my wrestling career for sure.
Yeah, and even working on the indies, it can be really fun, getting to be you. And that must have felt good, from being Justin, who you weren't, to being able to be PJ Black, who you are, the Daredevil, like a Daredevil outside as your real life personality. I think that always is so much better than the corporate character. And I do find that really cool. Now I want to talk to you about this. I was watching on YouTube. I just love to watch a lot of the indie stuff. I'm a big fan of Rob Van Dam and people like that. And I was watching a match. It was you versus Rob Van Dam. And when you got into the ring, like the ring looked terrible. Like it looked like a boxing ring. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so it was a boxing ring that they modified. This guy's never ran any shows before, but he really wanted to run this style of show, and I helped him set it up and get it together, and we got Rob to agree to do it. And the ring was just so bad. I remember telling all the guys, I was like, be careful on the top rope, try not to springboard, don't do any of these things, blah blah blah. And sure as heck, I went to the top. I gave Rob this crossbody. I don't know if you saw that, and went straight through the ring.
Yeah, I saw that. I was just watching it. That was brutal.
Yeah, brutal. And the referee has the earpiece, and he's like, yo, just stay down for the 3 count, because obviously the guys in the back, they were freaking out because it's a massive insurance liability. Listen, if Rob Van Dam gets hurt on your show, your career is over, right? So I was like, Rob, just stay down. And the ref counts 1, 2, and Rob kicks out. So I was like, okay, what are we gonna do now? There's a big hole in the ring, so we kind of work around it. And I remember I was like, okay, let's do this. And I did the little Spanish fly off the second rope. I have no idea how we pulled that off. And I was like, okay, Rob, just stay down. 1, 2, Rob kicks out again. I was like, God damn, Rob. And then how we ended up, and the referee's just like, his eyes are like this, and he's just yelling because someone's yelling in his ear, right? He's like, tell him to take it home, tell him to take it home, tell him to take it home. And we're just having so much fun. We're just like spot after spot after spot. And while there's a hole in the ring, it just shows you, like, both of us have been working for like decades, both of us. And yeah, we ended up pulling off a pretty decent match after that. We got to the back, and everyone was just like,
yeah, because that would have been really bad if Rob Van Dam got hurt, especially for such a company. Right. Yeah, that ring that did look brutal, that match. But I want to talk to you a bit about when now that you kind of talked about being in WWE, when you were in South Africa and you got the call up to WWE. Tell me the stages through that and how that kind of happened.
Oh yeah, man! I remember I was on the golf course actually, and I got the call, and I was just like, I will never ever forget that feeling. That was even better feeling than performing at WrestleMania, than doing like base jumping or anything. It was like the best feeling. I was like, wow, somebody's recognizing my talent. Not that was why they signed me, but that's the first thought you get. You're like, and I remember standing on the golf course and just dropping my phone. And I got home, and I said to my girlfriend, I was like, hey, do you want to move to the US? And she's like, no. And I was like, well, I'm going. So I guess we're breaking up. And yeah, it was just so awesome. And I remember what they offered me too. I'd signed the deal. I didn't even care how much it was. Like, I was like, who cares? Like, even if they pay me nothing, I get to wrestle full time every single day. That was like the best feeling. That the best feeling of accomplishment, right? I get to do this full time. And I remember it took them about 11 months to get my papers to work in the US. And I remember coming over, and apparently they paid me for those 11 months while they were working on my papers. They paid me from the day I signed. I didn't know that. I was, young, ignorant kid. So when I landed, I got this big check for like 11 months. I was like, oh, wow, I'm going to love this. And they were paying me double from what I signed. And at first I was like, should I say something? Should I tell somebody? You know, an honest person. So eventually I was like, hey, this is not what we agreed on. And Johnny Ace at the time, who ran talent relations, he was like, that's all right, man. And I forgot even what he said. He gave me this whole story, but it turns out that him and his brother and everybody worked with my dad like back in the day. So they all knew who I was. And I was like, that was even a different level of accomplishment that I didn't even know was there.
Yeah, and that's pretty awesome that your dad had that kind of recognition, especially in wrestling, something that you didn't expect. So finally going to WWE and being the first ever South African hired in wrestling. You know, in Northern Irish wrestling, there is a lot. There's where I live in Belfast. There is a lot of wrestling promotions, and it's well known around our country. But a lot of people around the world wouldn't think there would be much. You know, in Belfast because it's such a small country. So when Fit Finlay signed for WWE, he was the first ever person to sign from WWE. Sorry, the first ever Northern Irish person to sign from WWE. So obviously there was a big hype because of that, and I find a lot of inspiration from Fit Finlay, and he did, just because he was from a couple of miles down from where I live, it is a huge inspiration. So what was it like for you to be the first South African signed to WWE? Because I know that it was probably similar to when Fit signed.
Yeah, you know, like I mentioned before that when I was young, people were like, there's no blueprint. Like nobody from here has made it. And I was like, but this is just how people's mindset work, right? They're like, nobody's done that, so nobody's gonna do it. My mindset has always been like, nobody's done that. Great, I'm gonna be the first. Awesome. And then when I was the first, you know, I never really thought about it. I just always knew in my head that that's what I was gonna do. And when I was there, I was just like, you know, when I was in developmental, everyone just wanted to be on TV. And for me, I was like, I don't care. I get paid to wrestle every day. To me, that's making it in wrestling and in life. Like I'm getting a paycheck to play around with my friends in the ring. You know, everyone else was just like freaking out. I gotta go to TV. I gotta wrestle John Cena. I gotta do all these things. And I was like, whatever. I was just having fun. And I think you know that's why I got onto TV so quickly. It was like 10 months in developmental, and you know some of those guys have been there for 6, 7, 8 years. You know, and yeah, what a journey. That was probably the most fun 2 years of my life. It's like when I got to the US, because like I didn't have any, you know, I didn't have any bills to pay. I didn't have a car, a phone, any of that stuff. I was like literally a little backpack, go to wrestling, go to the gym, go tan, go to the show a couple of days a week, and go to training every single day. To me, that was awesome. Like that was so much fun.
Yep, and but when you went over, you know, from the people in South Africa, what was the hype like? Was there a lot of hype in South Africa? Did much people know about it? You know, was it like everybody around the place knew? You know, like the local community.
Oh yeah, many people don't know this actually, but South Africa is the third biggest wrestling audience in the world.
Oh, I didn't know
Much
that.
bigger than China, much bigger than India, where there's billions of people. And I also didn't know this. I know this because when I started wrestling when I was 15, I made a lot of friends, the kids that were kind of like my age. You know, much later in life, that one of those guys became Leo Kruger or Adam Rose.
Yeah.
But there was another guy that was incredibly talented, incredibly smart, but his parents didn't want him to wrestle. So he went into a different career, but we stayed friends ever since. And he's into like media and marketing in South Africa, and he runs a bunch of big stations. And he showed me the numbers one day. He's like, "Hey, do you realize how big wrestling is in South Africa?" I was like, "Dude, no, I had no idea. You know, South Africa is only like 50 million people. How can it like that means by these numbers, that means that like 1 in 2 people watch wrestling or know wrestling in South Africa." And so, but when I moved, I never thought about that at all, right? But because I was the first guy, I remember we had a SmackDown show in South Africa, and I landed at the airport, and it was like thousands of people holding up signs, and I was like, oh shit, okay, I've made it.
Yeah.
Like a WrestleMania moment. And at the show too, right? In Cape Town, we sold out all the tickets in like 10 minutes, so they had to book 2 more shows. So we did like 3 shows in Cape Town. And I remember just my music hitting, and it was like bigger than WrestleMania, right? Like the whole stadium just like rumbled. It was really cool. And I always knew that the wrestling was big in South Africa because, you know, like the biggest sports in South Africa is like rugby, and the matches on like Saturdays. And so between matches, I guess that's why it's so popular, because that's when like NXT and TNA, and way back it was Raw. is on, so everybody watches it because everybody watches rugby. So everybody's like, whether they want to or not, they watch wrestling. And I never really knew how. I mean, I knew wrestling was big because but you kind of live in your own bubble. Me and my friends, we trade cards and VHS tapes back then. But like when I went there with WWE, that's when I was like, oh wow, wrestling is really big in South Africa and all of Africa too, by the way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, even especially for us who are going to go and like even Fit Finlay. Most people you would have saw, as you know, World of Sport Wrestling, British wrestling. You've probably seen it before. A lot of our guys would be on World of Sport. I love that style of wrestling. That's where I would get a lot of my style from.
Me too, by the way. Yeah. Before that's why World of Wrestling is where I got a lot of stuff from. Fit Finney is one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. Nigel McGuinness, where I got to wrestle years later. Actually, when I left Europe, I remember that the FWA, they were like, hey, you can wrestle anybody you want, like anybody. And I was like, for your last match. And I was like, Doug Williams. Like Doug Williams was one of my favorites, at the time. Like Alex Shane was big. Paul Burchill just got signed to the WWE. I was like, Doug Williams it is. Like those are some of my favorite matches to watch, man. And like Fit Finney is just another level. And we've had so many conversations too. And Fit Finney's son, Fit Junior, he same thing. His dad wanted him to take that path where he goes to the dojo, goes to Mexico. So he contacted me one day and he's like, hey man, is there still any wrestling in South Africa? Because he used to go there all the time. Him and Regal, they used to be like an unofficial territory in the late 80s, early 90s. And I was like, yeah, it's not very big, but and he wanted his son to do that. So I set that up for him and he went to go live there for like a year to learn that style or just work shows and stuff. And, that was also, every time they see me, they're like, hey man, thank you. And it makes you feel good,
Yeah, and Fit is a legend. Even not just where we live. Yes, he's a legend, but around the world, he's a legend. In my opinion, even though he didn't do a lot of high flying moves, I think on their standard of wrestling and what it was, I think that's what he's great for. His style of wrestling. It was never anything massive off the top rope, but he could do really good storytelling in the ring. I just think that's what he was amazing for, and it's just brutal style. Even in his first match, I can remember. Obviously, I can't remember it, but I've watched it. His match against Matt Hardy. All he done was pull the ring apron, and Michael Cole was like, "I've never seen anything like this. This is the Belfast style," and it was hardly anything spectacular, but he's able to make everything look amazing. But from back to what I was saying there, when Fit Finlay obviously got signed to the WWE, obviously Northern Ireland was quite a big buzz, and I think everyone would probably know of Fit Finlay, where we live, even if you're not a big wrestling fan. People, if I said I was a wrestling fan, people would say Big Daddy Giant Haystacks, then they would say, oh yeah, that guy who made it, Fit Finlay. So he has quite a big name around the UK scene. So, and I believe that he paved the way for a lot of people from Northern Ireland, like Tucker and Big Damo, who later got on to WWE after he first got signed. So I'm sure you were like that for the South African wrestlers, quite a big inspiration.
Yeah, I only realized that like years later too. When I went back home and I grew up with this one kid, and he was also just around wrestling when I was young. His uncle was one of the heavyweight champion at the time, so he was always at the shows, and me and him during intervals we did like little matches for people. And I remember like we put our little masks on and go out there with our speedos. We were like 8 to 9 years old at the time, and like just doing like little mini matches, and people would watch it, and it was such a good feeling. And then years and years later, I started wrestling, and he had no interest. And then when I got to the WWE, he got massively interested. He started a promotion. I teach seminars all the time when I go to South Africa. I would never tell people I'm there. I would just rock up at schools, because people were like, oh, food, like, it's fun for them, and it's fun for me too. And he's like one of the biggest names out there, and we've been setting up storylines for years and years and years, like, because we grew up together, so the story writes itself. What's the story? Best friends, better enemies, or whatever it is, it writes itself. And he's incredibly talented. He got signed 3 times by the WWE, but every single time something happened, so he never got to do that. But he runs the promotions in South Africa and the schools. And like it's awesome to go back there and wrestle with him, because I've technically had my first match against him when I was 9 years old. and he's doing a fantastic job. And it's cool to see whenever I rock up at the school, like so many kids, how it inspires them, and they obviously all know me because they all grew up watching it, and that's it's still surreal to me. It's like I'm like, I know that, it's not like I know, but it's like I know I was on WWE, but like I forget that everybody watches that. Like all the little kids that come to the wrestling school, they all watch it. So it's like it's a really big. It's gonna sound vain, but like that I'm the inspiration for them. That's really cool, man. That's a big deal. That's a big deal, and it humbles you in a way that you never thought of.
Yeah, and when you mentioned there, and even when you talk about a while ago, you mentioned you were on WWE or you were pending for maybe about 5 months until you finally got on. So talk us through the 5 month stage. What were you doing at that time, and what did it take to get in?
Yeah, so it was at the developmental. You kind of Dusty Rhodes was the promo coach. Norman Smiley was there. Dr. Tom Pritchard, Steve Kern.
Yeah.
This was before Bill DeMott took over. And those guys are just fantastic. Dusty is just was a genius. So was Steve Kern. So Dr. Tom was probably the best trainer I've ever had, hands down. It was just a cool experience to pick those guys' brains every day and getting taught by them. And Dusty was like, just throw shit at the wall, whatever sticks. Because we try stuff, and then when it doesn't work, we try something else. And that's how Adam Rose got started. He was like, hey, just be this guy, just do this. And Dusty wanted me to, at that time, American Idol. I don't know if you can remember Adam Lambert. Yeah, the black hair with the black earrings, and then Dusty was like, just be that guy. I was like, all right. So I created the character called Justin Angel, and I became champ like within a month or two. And like people hated me, because people don't know who I am. Like you get to this developmental school, and I made a living of being like I played the pretty boy. But I got there, and everyone was better looking than me, and bigger than me, and stronger than me. And I was like, oh wow, like what I have to do to stand out here. And like when you get into, people don't know who I am because I'm from a completely different country. They've never seen me on the indies. They've never seen me anywhere. They don't know anything about me. So like they kind of like haze you in a way, or like talk down to you. But then within a month I came champion. Everyone was like, oh shit, everyone wanted to be my friend. It was a hell of an experience. Like Dusty was just like a genius, like working on like promos and character stuff. Like he dialed in at that time, that during that era, he dialed in most of those characters. It's just the most fond memories working with those guys. It was like, I realize now how blessed I really was.
Yeah, and I think Dusty is one of the, if not the best guy to work on promos. Everyone, obviously, his son gets a lot of that as well. Cody Rhodes, he's great on the mic. So for you, what was it like learning from Dusty, and what's like a great memory of Dusty, like a very memorable moment of talking to Dusty?
Oh, so many. So let me take you back to my first day at FCW. So, like I said before, I get there, and obviously nobody there knows who I am, including the coaches, right? So they don't know where to put you, how they're going to book you, like what are they going to do? So what do they do? They throw you in the ring, and they go, here, just do a 5-minute match for me, do a 7-minute match, or they kind of give you a story, and then that way they can see you work, see what the character is about, whatever. So my first day there, it was me and Low-Ki.
Oh,
so I've been watching Low-Ki for years, and I love his style. I think Brandon's fantastic. I think he's just one of the best, like in his field. So they were like, hey, you two new guys, jump in the ring and do a 9-minute match for us. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. And we don't have time. There's no planning or anything. They just be like, okay, this is the story. You're going over. You're the good guy. You're the bad guy. Kaboom. So I'm like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. I already know all his moves. I know how to counter it. And I didn't tell him that. And I don't know if anybody's ever met Low-Ki in real life. He's a very stern person, right? So everything he did, I just countered it because I knew his moves. I know his whole moveset. And at first it made him upset. But then I don't know if you've ever done like a strong style match with like an old school guy. Like the harder you hit him, the safer, harder you hit him, the more respect you get, right? So he was laying the stuff in, and I would just give it back to him. And he just like, you'd see his face, and we would just go at it. We would like people call it, I guess, a stiff fist, but it wasn't. It was super safe, but we really hit each other. It was such a fun match. And I remember Dusty walking into the room, and Dusty was the booker of the shows at the time, right? It switched between him and Steve Kern, who was the head booker. And at the time in FCW, you had to work your way up to get to the shows, right? You have to like referee matches, set up the ring, pay your dues. You work your way up to get to it takes about a couple of months to get to the show. And after that match, me and Key, I remember Dusty, sometimes he didn't even come in there. He was in his office, but he was watching it on the camera. He walks in when the bell rang, he walks in, and for that week, Steve Kern was going to be the head booker for the show. And he yells out, he goes, "Hey, Steve, whoever was the main event for this weekend, bump them, put these two kids on." So my first week there, I was like in the main event with Low Key, and like we did that for like 2-3 nights in a row, and it felt good that like Dusty Rhodes like recognized that.
Yeah, and that's so cool. Low Key's a legend of wrestling. I agree with you of being one of the best in his field. So that must have been so cool. Imagine the first few weeks. You go into, you expect to work your way up, maybe not even being worried about not being used properly or whatever, and you get in the ring and main event with Low Key. That's just incredible. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that, but I want to bring in this comment quickly. Sports Center Nana says watching from Pittsburgh. Yeah, that's awesome. Great. So make sure you have any questions for PJ Black, 3-time WWE Tag Team Champion. Make sure to ask him here. He's very willing to answer questions. But back to this. So you mentioned our wrestling the likes of Low Key, and then you won the championship and stuff. Learning from the likes of Dusty Rhodes, did that elevate your promo work quite a lot?
Oh yeah, dude, and just spiked my confidence, and it made me work on other things. And what got me to the WWE was the character work, and obviously in the beginning the character work wasn't the strongest because you go through all these things, and like some of my weak points became my strong points and vice versa. I remember right before that too, right before they pull us in the ring. No, wait, this was the tryout. This was a couple of months before. So they pull you into this office, and it's very intimidating. You're standing in this office with Steve Kerr, Dr. Tom Pritchard, Norman Smiley, Dusty Rhodes, Fit was there. Arn Anderson was there. Like all these people are there, and it's so intimidating. I grew up watching all these people. And they're like, "Oh, let's see what this kid can do before we give you the tryout. Let's see what your strengths and your weaknesses are." So they put in my little DVD. I had a little DVD at the time, which I thought was one of my best matches ever, right? I did this like 3-minute entrance with this girl dancing and like doing all this stuff and like, really good promo before the match, really good after the match. But the match was like really fucking good. It was against Mikey Whiplash.
Oh, yeah, what a legend.
What a legend. And I remember after the match, Dr. Tom takes the DVD out and he says to Dusty, he goes, "Well, he can't wrestle for shit, but he can do all the other things." And I was like, oh wow, I really thought that was one of my best matches ever. And I still to this day don't know if he was like taking the mickey or if he was serious or what, but that's how my journey started there.
Yep, and then you've been a part of, well, what I don't know really the time differences, but that kind of what you were in kind of rebranded into NXT. Nobody really knew what NXT was. But when you debuted, and I'm gonna tell you this. So my earliest memory of wrestling, and the reason I first got into wrestling was because of John Cena. And he was a huge inspiration. Like even now for me wrestling, the fact that fans go over to me. I'm not making I'm John Cena, but what I'm saying is like fans at indie shows that would go over and ask me for pictures. It's just awesome. From people who I used to idolize, like John Cena, for people going over to me and asking me for pictures, things like that. But back to the point, like when I think my earliest memory of wrestling ever was these guys who were trying to rack WWE with Wade Barrett, and wondering who these guys were. And I want to and something about this was I hated the Nexus. When I went home, I think it was at my grandmother's house. And when I went home, I was going over to my parents. So I hate these guys. Look at these guys. Look what they're doing to John Cena. And I saw you there obviously with John Cena, and that's obviously when your time in WWE really kicked off, was when you made your debut. And what a debut it was to make. I'm sure there were you got so many hate comments and stuff towards you after that. So that obviously elevated your character quite a lot.
Oh yeah, that was so much fun. We were getting like death threats and stuff, and like people like marks or whatever you want to smart mark, whatever you want to call it. Like a lot of people know how wrestling works, but like that's the point of wrestling, right? You want to blur that line, like what's real and what's not real. So like the fact that people in the business and people who knew and understood wrestling got really upset. It's like that's when you're doing a good job as a heel. And I remember like changing my style completely. And Vince pulls me into the office and he's like, whether you're a face or a heel, you don't change your style. You just change the position where you put those spots or moves or whatever. And I was like, I've been wrestling at the time, wrestling for 11 years, but I never thought of that. I was like, that's actually genius. That's why he's Vince McMahon. Like, that's why he created $1 billion company. He knows, right? Because when you're a heel, you think, you don't have to do anything flashy or high spotty, or like vice versa. But look at like some of the greatest heels ever, like Kurt Angle, AJ Styles when he was a heel. Like you don't have to change your style at all. You kind of just change your attitude. That's what Vince said to me, and I never understood that until he said that line. He goes, "Look, you don't change your style, your moveset. You just change the attitude." And I was like, "Oh wow, yeah, that makes so much sense." Like I've been doing this for 11 years, but in wrestling for like 20 years, and that never really clicked to me until Vince said it to me. And yeah, that was awesome. What a fun time, like getting death threats and people saying us hate mail. It gave me a really thick skin, because I'm an introvert, and at the time, just being thrown on TV, it was a little bit much. I couldn't go to the mall, I couldn't go to like the local CVS, I couldn't do anything. It was like kind of a big deal at the time because everybody hated Nexus so much. And but it gave me a really thick skin. It taught me a lot about life and about people, and also about the art of professional wrestling. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to evoke emotions out of people. That's why Fit Finney is so good, because he's a storyteller, right? You don't have to do any flashy moves. You literally have to you can just kick and punch. If you can tell a good story and pull that emotion out of people, you'll be successful. People, like, even if they don't understand it subconsciously, they're like, wow, this is actually really good. So it taught me a lot, it being thrown in the deep end and getting that kind of reaction as the heels. Like, it pulled people out of the woodwork too. People would come to me like, hey, I haven't watched wrestling in 10 years, or I haven't watched it in 15 years. But I've started watching because of the Nexus. This is so cool. Made me feel good too, right? But that whole run was so short. It was like less than a year. We didn't even have a WrestleMania moment. So it was short-lived, but it was incredibly impactful on all of us.
Oh yeah, and it was impactful on me as well. I don't think I would still be a wrestling fan right now, if it weren't for John Cena or the Nexus. Especially like when I think that's how I first saw John Cena, was with the Nexus. I don't even think it was. I think it was years after that even happened. But obviously, I was a kid. I didn't understand how long ago this was. I was thinking it was just yesterday. John Cena. I mean, some of these evil guys attacked John Cena, and it just shows how impactful your character was to so many people's lives. And for me, obviously, for a kid, obviously they'd be quite easily tricked. And so I was at the time, I had no clue what wrestling was. But for grown men who hadn't watched wrestling for years, even giving you death threats and all, obviously that's not good. But it's good. It's awesome that's how over your character was, and I think that just shows how good it actually was. How good,
another thing on that too, right? You never know if people are serious or if they just kind of like playing along. Like people are like, and that's what's cool too. It's kind of confusing, but it's like, a lot of people know how wrestling works these days, right? So you kind of just play along. You boo the heel, you cheer the face, you kind of like play along, right? For lack of a better term. Sometimes it's subconsciously, but at first I got really angry. I was like, "What? This guy wants to kill me? Like, what? Because I play a character on TV?" And then I was like, "Wait a minute. Is he really angry? Or is he like playing along?" And then, like, you never know. Just like we blur the line, fans can also blur that line. And that's what makes this art form so freaking awesome.
I know, and the thing is that even there is a line, because people will go there and say, people will go to wrestling shows and say, "Oh, I'm not going to go and see that fake stuff. The only reason I'm going is for my kids." Then after they're not going to admit it, but after that show, they're going to say, "Oh yeah, the kids enjoyed it," but they'll not say if they enjoyed it or not. But really, I believe that even though no matter anyone who goes to a wrestling show, if you can make it, for the moment, for the storytelling, I think people can be hypnotized. Like, people know that the wrestling's scripted, but when they're in the middle of that ring, they want to believe that it's real. So no matter what kind of movie or TV show you're watching, you don't sit there and think to yourself, this is all fake. You want to believe it. So everyone wants to believe wrestling, and if the characters are good, like the Nexus were, people wanted to believe it.
That's spot on, my friend. Spot on. And many people don't realize that. Triple H said this all the time. He goes, "Look, you go watch Jurassic Park. You know that shit's not real, but you're
Yeah.
there to be entertained. So you go to these shows to be entertained, and that's why in the modern day of wrestling, I love the evolution of wrestling. People want to say the catchphrases out loud. They want to cheer. They want to boo. They want to get involved because that's what makes it fun, right? It's like Hunter used this analogy all the time. He's like, "Look, Jurassic Park isn't real, but those are the special effects. Those are the spots." And then the story, that's why the story is so important, because you might remember like, oh, wow, cool, that helicopter blew up or whatever, but you remember the love story. That's why most movies have love stories in them, right? Because it evokes emotion, and sometimes it sucks, but that's just what gets you pulled into the movie, whether you like that or not. Like I don't like most people don't like love stories, but if there's like a Terminator is a love story, like Jurassic Park was always like a little side love story, and that's what gets you into it. Like the special effects, the high spots are awesome, but you need a little bit of everything to make that magic happen. And I like what you said there. That's so true. I've experienced that so many times in my life where people are like, "Oh yeah, I'm just here for my kids," but they end up cheering the hardest. They end up getting the photo up, and like they buy the merch, and they get so into it. And then when the show is over, they're like, "Oh man, I can't wait for the next one." But and the kid is like, "Oh yeah, that was fun." But the dad's like, "No, we come to the next one, right? We're going to the next one." Like he's almost like wanting his kid to. He's trying to convince his kid to convince him to go to the next show, but it's already a done deal. I've seen that so many times in my career.
Yep. I want to bring this comment in here. Sports Center Nonana just sent me a super sticker there, so £5. That's really greatly appreciated. You didn't need to do that, so thanks so much for that. Yes, thanks so much for sharing that. That does not go unnoticed.
Yeah, thank you.
So I want to bring something else in here. So after when the Nexus kind of formed, whose idea was it? I did the Nexus idea come around.
It was Vince's idea. So before Nexus, let me take you back to NXT season 1, right? So they had this idea. They wanted to be like the Ultimate Fighter, where all these guys live in a house and compete against each other. But in true WWE fashion, that never came to fruition. Like on the day, it was just like, oh shit, let's throw these guys in some kind of reality show. That's never been done before. It wasn't scripted at all. Most people don't know that. They just kind of like let us do our own thing, and we probably messed it up so bad that's why they had to heavily script season 2, 3, and 4. But anyway, like after that was done, we kind of went back to developmental, and we just sat and we're like, oh wow, what are we gonna do now? That was like so embarrassing to do some of those challenges and tasks. Like we all thought our careers was over. And Vince calls us, and he pulls. We were all living in Tampa, Florida at the time, and there was a role was up in Miami. It's only a 5-hour drive. So they were like, we get this email like, hey, Vince is requesting you guys there, and he wants you in the office at this time. And we're like, all right, this is weird, but whatever. At least we get to go to TV. And he pulls us into this office, and he lays out this plan, and we're all just kind of like dead silent. Nobody said a word. Like we're just kind of looking at each other, because in wrestling you can always. Dr. Tom used to say this: what's old is new, and what's new is old. You can always go back to a storyline and refer to that and get ideas. You can always get like character ideas or anything. You can always go back and look at it. But there was nothing to reference for what he was trying to explain to us. What became the Nexus. We were just so confused. We were like, oh, yeah, I guess that sounds cool, whatever. But right before it happened, like none of us believed that this was going to work. Like we were just like, yeah, but we got to do what Vince says, right? He's the genius. And yeah, little did we know that was definitely going to work. Everything he said, just exactly how he said it too, became true. And it was a pretty cool moment. And like after that happened, it had such a big impact on the wrestling community and people who didn't even watch wrestling at the time. I remember all of us drove back and went back to FCW, and just like the Nexus group, we were like, yeah, we're not going to come here anymore. We're just going to be on TV from now on.
I think the idea of that is so cool that something like that tried to reform again. I actually believe that when I think it was in 2020 with Retribution. I think that was actually terrible. I hated the idea of that. It didn't compare to the Nexus, and what the thing that with the Nexus, it was just incredible. And this is kind of off topic, but I do just want to mention this in my music playlist. We Walk Alone is We Walk Alone, We Live Unknown. That song is still in my music playlist.
Same.
It's actually one of my favorite songs. So and it matched it so well. So, how did you get that theme song? Who came up with the idea of that?
Honestly, I have no idea. We just in the beginning we had no music, right? We would just walk before like the Raw's obviously live, so there's always a dark match right before the show starts. Before the red light goes on, there's a lot happening in the arena. I mean, you've been around it, you know how it works. So we'd always make our entrance as the red light goes on, right? So and we had no music in the beginning, and the people just like started booing us and hating us and like throwing us with stuff, and that's why we all like kind of like smiled at each other, and we were just like, oh, wow, this is so cool, you know, because when you evoke any emotion, whether it's a boo, a cheer, whatever, like that's the same feeling for us. And we had no music, and like, you know, we kind of like just smirked a lot, and we got to the back, and Vince was like, I like that smirks, do that, because you guys are like pissed off rookies. You're really pissed off at like how we treated you in NXT. Like, show that to me. He's like, you know, yeah. He's like, and we're like, okay, cool. And we started doing some stuff, and like we practiced some promos with him actually. And the more we worked with him, you know, the one day we walked, so they turn off the lights, and we'd walk down the ramp, and people already like, you know, they see the big yellow N, and people start booing. And then one day the music just hit, and we were just like, oh wow, this puts on a whole different level. You know, you just instantly fall in love with that music too. You know, like, this is so cool. And then, you know, further down the line, the music would hit, and people already boo because they know who's coming. It's crazy how that cycle works. Like you think you get music over by doing a certain thing, but then a completely different thing actually gets it over, and then it gets the music, like, adds on top of that almost.
Yeah, and I think something really cool was not many people. Some people didn't. Like, a lot of people might have knew what NXT was, but a lot of the people in the crowd didn't. Were just confused. You know, even the commentators were confused. Everybody was confused. Like, who is this? But there was maybe 5 fans I saw in the crowd shouting NXT, NXT. I still remember that. I found that really cool. Some fans knew what NXT was.
Yeah, it's because, you know, that show, that the first one was in Miami, and, you know, the developmental FCW at the time, we did shows all over Florida, all over. We did the Miami fairs. I ended up living in Miami for a little while. Like, you know, everybody knew there what FCW, what later became NXT was. So it was kind of cool. It's kind of like working in front of a home crowd almost.
Yeah, I want to bring one of the comments here because it's got a lot to do with what we were talking about. Wrestling for Life asks, what's the worst thing you've said or done to get over as a heel?
The worst thing I've said or done? Oh man, I've said some shitty things, but as a heel, you know, you usually say the generic things, and you kind of like see what works. It's like stand-up comedy, right? You see what works, what doesn't work, and you go to these towns, like usually the most generic thing just gets you over. You know, you get to whatever the local team is, you just kind of like diss them and do. But let me see, the worst thing I've done. Damn, I'd have to think about that and come back to that. I've done a lot of like terrible things, but actually, I almost don't want to even like say this out loud, but I remember I was in full on character. Right after Nexus, I was feuding with Wade Barrett, and he, you know, like we set up the matches via tweets. Twitter came out in like 2010-ish. It was pretty big at the time, like 2011, it was massive. I remember like tweeting some really, like, I wouldn't say racist, but like derogatory things I tweeted to him. And, you know, like years later that came back to me. It's like, you can't be saying that stuff online, not even if you're joking. And I was like, yeah, but I was fully in character. I was actually going to become a coach at NXT, and they drew up that tweet, and they didn't want to hire me because of it. I was like, you do realize that was 10 years ago, and you do realize I was in character. And they're like, yeah, but it's on the internet forever. And maybe that was just their excuse because they didn't want to go through with the deal. Who knows? But yeah, be careful what your character says online, because that shit will come back, especially in this day and age, right? You can't hide any of that stuff. Like, even if you delete the tweet, the stuff will pop up on like Twitter and on Reddit or whatever these sites are. It's always there. It's always there. And then I in that same conversation, I told someone to go kill himself, and then I was like, you know, I was in character. I was just like messing around, but I was like thinking, like, you can't be saying stuff like that, dude. That's like serious stuff. Like, not even in character should you be able to do that things. You know, like, I was young, so I learned from that, and I guess that's answers that question. That's a terrible thing to do to get over as a heel.
Yeah, I didn't expect them answers. But but when you mentioned, or you know, getting over as a heel, so when you started feuding with John Cena, tell us when things started getting when things started getting more prominent and backstage, how things started, gradually getting better. Do you know what I mean, for the Nexus?
Yeah, even like live events, right? It's non-televised shows. So we do, back in the day, we did a lot of them, and because we were Nexus, we did both. We did Raw and SmackDown, so we hardly ever had any days off. We had to drive between shows because we had to get there. And obviously, Nexus was doing the feud against Cena. So on the road, I like, not to toot my own horn, but I was more capable of doing that style of matches than anybody else in the Nexus, right? So they threw me in there. So it was always a singles match or always a tag match where the other guys would just stand on the ring, or if it was one of them eventually in the ring, I would do most of the work, or most of the planning or whatever, right? Because I was just the most, like, I don't know, capable guy to do that kind of matches. So I learned a lot from him. I learned, like, for like a whole 5 months, I got to wrestle him almost every day. It was so cool, like it was fantastic, because I was also a big fan of him. People don't realize how hard that guy works. He's probably one of the hardest. I mean, you can see now in movies, like how hard he works. He's like in everything these days, he's just a hardworking dude. Like whatever he does, he gives it his all. And I learned so much from him, and the way he works too is very different to a traditional wrestler, because he listens to what the crowd wants and when they want it, and he'll control that rhythm. He'll control the pace, even though he's a baby face. In wrestling, the heel always controls the match and the pace and the crowd, right? But he was just so good that he could do it as a baby face, and that's like a skill that just cannot be taught, and nobody in this day and age will ever be at that level where he was at that time, which it's kind of like blows my mind to even think about. Maybe in the future some kids will get it, but that's a lost art, because people, as you probably know, like we plan a lot of stuff, we choreograph a lot of stuff. Back in the day, we just kind of like say, hey, I might do this and this and this, and you just go out there. I'll give you an example. Like if you do this one high spot and it gets a massive reaction, the next night you're like, hey, remember that spot got a massive, and you do it and it doesn't get a reaction, and you're so confused. You're like, why did that not work, right? So it teaches you to read the crowd and learn what they actually want. They'll tell you. I mean, the crowd will tell you what kind of style they want. I know I'm veering off here, but I'll give you an example. I was wrestling in the middle of nowhere in West Virginia, and it was Stevie Richards. And we did this awesome strong style match, because he's an amazing striker, and like people just didn't react, and we were so confused. And then someone threw a bottle into the ring, and he slipped on the water, and big pop. Everyone was like, "Yeah!" I was like, "All right, I guess this is the style of wrestling we're gonna do now." And as a wrestler, that's really good to like understand that and read what people actually want. People like different stuff. Some people like the strong style stuff. Some people like the the carny wrestling. And you just have to kind of adapt. I almost forgot the question. Working with John. So I learned like all those things that I've learned throughout the years, even like watching wrestling subconsciously, like clicked for me. I was like, okay, this is why we do this kind of thing. This is how this works. And like imagine like your first day, like they were like, okay, you're gonna do a 15-minute match with John Cena. So nervous, right? I'm like, oh wow, like I watched this guy on TV for years. So I go to John, I'm like, hey man, like what do you want to do? He goes, I don't know. I'll tell you in there. Bye. And I was like freaking out. I was like, just tell me one thing at least. Like, what's the finish? Like how are we gonna start? Like, just dude, like, just tell me one thing. And he was like, no. And I don't know if he got a kick out of that, watching me stress the whole time. But I learned very quickly because I had to work him for 5 months, like almost like 3-4 times a week. So I was like, okay, this is how he does it. This is his style. This is just how he's so good at listening to what the people want. And then sometimes he'll take it away from them and then give it to them at a later stage in the match, just so the pop is even bigger than it was supposed to be, right? And like little things like that I learned from him. It's just like I'll be forever grateful. I mean, there's not a lot of people that can say a lot of good things about him, but if it wasn't for him, the 450 would have never existed in the Nexus, and I got to work with him every night. I got that just learned so much from just working him.
And the thing is, with Cena as well, when non-wrestling fans watch him, people would maybe say they would get bored while watching him, because what happened was, even maybe a few years back, he would even the match with The Miz, with what was the I Quit match, he was getting beat so much at that point, but he was refusing to quit. And every time maybe he got whipped into the steel steps, and he still wouldn't quit. But he was just getting beat and beat and beat. And I think it's something with, I don't know why, but it's people who have so many championships like Ric Flair and Cena would be the guys who would be down the canvas the most, but they'd be the most well renowned wrestlers. And I think that's what's amazing about Cena. You know, he understands how to work a crowd, and he understands how to make the crowd want to cheer for him. And you do, I realize this while wrestling as well. You need to take things slowly, and when you are down on the canvas, you while you're down, you want the crowd to want you to get back up. So when you hear this signal, the clap, that's when you kind of gradually get back up. So and Cena understood that so much. Even when he was down, people wanted to see him get back up. So I think he was genius with that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, and you recognize that stuff because you're working matches and you're in the business, but most people don't realize or recognize that, right? They're just like, oh wow, he's so boring. He's just got doing the same 5 moves. He goes, yeah, because that works every single time, no matter where we go in the world. We can be in deepest, darkest China. We'll be like doing matches in India and Norway, and like that works. And years later he changed it up because he had to. And wrestling evolves, and like you have to like get up with the times. But it just shows you he could have done that stuff if he wanted to, but he didn't have to. Like that's how smart he is, really.
Yeah, and we obviously talked about their work in Cena. Probably your most famous person that you worked with. Probably worked with more famous people, but he's pretty famous. And even working other people in WWE. I'm going to talk to you a lot about the Nexus, obviously, but because it's a big point. But talk us about working with some of the other people. Like who was your favorite people to work with while in WWE? Some of the bigger names.
Oh wow, like so many guys. I love working Big Show so much. When me and Heath were tag champs, we did a whole Europe trip where we wrestled Big Show and Kane, the two legit biggest dudes, not biggest characters, biggest names, and physically big dudes. We had to come up with matches, like it's just a completely different style too. So much fun. Cesaro, I love working Cesaro. Jack Swagger, just phenomenal talent. Heath, and every single person you ask this question will say Heath, because he's just one of those guys who can just go with anybody. He can just do anything. He's down for anything. And then, so many names. I mean, most people in WWE roster, they're there for a reason. They're really good. But like Tyson Kidd too. Tyson Kidd is just a next level, like, mind for wrestling. There's very few guys in the business like that can think like that. Like he's like on that level of Arn Anderson, Dean Malenko, Jamie Noble. Like there's very few guys who can think like that. And that's why he's an agent now. Just fantastic wrestler. I love the tag team we did too. Let me think who. R-Truth is a super fun guy. He's just always down for anything, and he always. That's actually the biggest compliment Vince ever gave me. So I was supposed to wrestle R-Truth on SmackDown, and it's like one of the filler matches, right? Like if a segment goes long or short, they'll put this match in. So 3 times they're like just stay changed because this match might happen or it might not happen, right? So obviously we didn't plan anything. It's like, and it changes too because it's live TV. So you're like, oh, you have 3 minutes. Oh, you have 2 minutes. Oh, now you have 7 minutes. Like that's why it's like hard to plan anything, right? And I was like, it's R-Truth. It's so easy. You could just do like he does the dance and whatever. He does like the up and over into the backflip. I remember I was a heel, so I reversed him. I did that. I did the up and over. I did the thing, and I did this like really stupid dance, man. I was so embarrassed watching it back actually. But I remember getting to the back, and Vince like. He shook my hand and he goes, that was some of your best work ever. And I laughed because I thought he was joking, right? But then I realized he was serious. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, this is the stuff that he likes. Because think about it, right? Like he's seen a million moonsaults in his life, pretty ones. He's seen a million powerball. He's seen a million things. But when you can pop him with a character thing that's so silly, then you've mastered the art of professional wrestling. But yeah, Vince too, working with Vince, like I got to 450 him. We worked in a few storylines with him, backstage and in the ring. Everybody. Like it's hard to pinpoint 1 or 2 people. Everybody there is so good. I mean, some of my favorite matches I had was against Hunico on Superstars. There's some really good matches. If anyone who's a fan of like really long matches, that's kind of like indie style wrestling, is go watch Superstars from like 2011 to like 14. Some incredible matches there, man. Like, wow. I remember watching like a 20-minute match, Evan Bourne against John Morrison, like just blew my mind. I was like, man, like I've never seen people do stuff like this before ever. like just so many matches, you know. And yeah, so Hunico, me and him had a couple of bangers on there. Me and Tyson too. But yeah, also just working with Undertaker. Obviously, you know, I remember watching him. One of his first matches was actually in South Africa when I was probably like 7 or 8 years old, and I remember seeing him, and he was only wrestling at a week at the time, so it was terrible. Texas Callaway, whatever his gimmick was. So like years later, it was so cool. Like talking to him, I'm like, "Hey man, do you remember this?" And he's like, "Yeah, I do." Obviously, because it was one of his first matches. How is he not going to remember that? I was like, "I was a kid. I was right there. I was at the show." And he's like, "No freaking way." You know, same with Fit. I was just like, when I told him who I was, he's like, "Oh freaking way!" And that's so cool. You know, like how I've actually been around wrestling my whole life. But yeah, everybody to work with in WWE is great. Like even guys backstage who you don't get to see, you know, like the IRS and like Jamie Noble. These guys are agents. These guys are just fantastic brains to pick, and just
So underrated.
Yeah, and just being there too. A lot of the new generation guys. I mean, I don't know if they do this or not, but you have all those guys at your fingertips. You should pick their brains all the time.
Yeah. Jimmy Noble is so underrated as well in the ring. I think, in my opinion, probably one of the most underutilized as well. When you look at the likes of Sheldon Benjamin, Ludwig Kaiser, Jimmy Noble, I think they're the top three most underrated people who don't get the respect that they deserved. But backstage, do you have any sort of weird encounters that you had with some people, like some strange or funny encounters?
So many. I mean, wow. I don't want to like give bad vibes, but I've never been in a real fight in my whole life, except this one time, and this guy swung at me, and I didn't realize. I thought he was joking, so I kind of, you know, I'm very quick. I kind of like just dodged it like this, and I pushed him away, and then I was like, oh wait a minute, this guy's serious. He wants to like actually fight me, and I was like, all right. And when I was about to like get ready, like Mark Henry and Big Show pulled us apart. I won't tell you too much about that, but I've had some really funny encounters with people. I'll tell you a funny story that the Big Show, he's legit a giant, right? We're in the show in I think it was in England somewhere, the O2 Arena. Yeah. And you know, he's a giant, like, right? So he has a towel. He's trying to go shower, and he's putting this towel around him. And you know those little hand towels? Imagine for you wrapping a little hand towel around.
Yeah.
That's what a normal size towel looked like. Right. So, and you know those soap dispensers, those hand dispensers. He was trying to get soap out of it, and the thing wouldn't work, and this thing didn't work. And he's like, he's a giant, right? So he just goes, poof, he punches it, and this thing just explodes, dude. And he puts his hand in there, gets some soap, and he just walks casually over to the shower. I was like,
Crazy.
Wow, the problems of a giant.
And even, you know, working with the Big Show as well, he's not even, obviously wasn't the most athletic wrestler, but I do believe he was a big part of that era of wrestling. A lot of people would know the Big Show.
Oh yeah, and you say he's not an athletic wrestler. He's incredibly athletic. They just never let him do that. Go watch his WCW stuff. He did a moonsault off the top. He did all kinds of stuff. In fact, funny story. I was just telling you about that tour. Me and Heath were champs, and we were wrestling in Europe. And you know, it's live events. It's non-televised. I don't know if I ever told this story, but or if I should even. I mean, it's so silly. I remember like you know, Big Show's not known for anything high flying, right? So I tag Heath in. He shoots him off the ropes, and Big Show just reverses it, right? And he goes, drop kick. And like as Heath runs the ropes, he's like, huh? He's like, imagine like Big Show calling a drop kick to you, right? Heath is just like, as he runs the ropes, he's so confused. He like looks back at him, he's like this, and as he hits the ropes, boom, most beautiful drop kick you've ever seen from the Big Show. So he wasn't known for athletic things, but he could do all those things if he wanted to.
And I suppose he didn't need to. There is them kind of guys who don't need to do that.
Exactly. What a pop, by the way. Like,
yeah. When you imagine you and Heath having matches with the Big Show and Keaton, imagine being in a ring with the same two people at wrestling, you know, in the ring, and you being able to get them championships, the WWE Tag Team Championships, probably something you've dreamed of, like winning the championship in WWE. So how did that come around?
Yeah, I don't even remember the first one, how it came around, but I just remember being super excited, and we were just kind of like, it's called a paper champion, right? We were just in a transition to for the next storyline, and but we were just so excited, and then something else happened, and then that storyline didn't happen, so we won it again, and then we won it again, and I was like, oh shit, Heath, we made it. there was just some cool, fun stories, you know. But it was never. I don't know if it was supposed to happen or that they were trying to like push us or not push us. But I just remember it was just so much fun, you know. Like if you're a champ and you get to travel, you know you especially live events, you got the belt. So like we're traveling to Europe and like everyone takes the belt at TSA, they take the belt out, and it's like sparks conversations, and it's really exciting, right? It's like little stupid things that you don't get to experience all the time.
Yeah, and you know stuff like that must be incredible. Even if it was just to build up another storyline, I do think it's really cool that you did get them win the WWE Championship 3 times because that's a great accolade to have. You know, I mean, in wrestling, I was a 3-time WWE Tag Team Champion, uh, and you know that was a really cool accolade. So that's where kind of come to the end. I want to talk to you a bit about just some of the bigger moments. So when you wrestled on like you main evented SummerSlam. Then you wrestled on WrestleMania as well. So talk to me about kind of coming up to them bigger shows. I'm going to bring in this comment because it's quite like it. So I want you to tell me a wee bit about the build up of it, but I'm going to bring in this comment. So what's the catering like backstage at WWE?
Oh, it's amazing. It's the same catering company that travels with us. You know, there's anything you can imagine. There's always steak, there's always chicken, there's always like whatever, you know. Vince always gets he gets the same thing wrapped and put in his office, but doesn't always eat it. So I would go to the end of the show. I would go and get that because that's the good steak, right? And he caught me once doing that, but that's another story. Yeah, the catering is amazing. But what was the other question? Sometimes I'll just go. Sometimes like that. Sometimes I'll just go. If I live in Los Angeles. If they're in town, I would literally just go because you know everybody remembers me. I just walk backstage. The security guards are like, "Hey, what's up, PJ?" Yeah, I just kind of like walking like I'm booked. Let's go sit in catering. That's how awesome it is.
So tell me the build up of some of them shows. You know, SummerSlam at WrestleMania, even for non wrestling fans, you know it's the biggest show of the year. So talk us through, you know, being backstage at them shows.
Yeah, it's massive. Like that SummerSlam was incredible because it was the Staples Arena. That's like means the crypto arena now in LA or whatever. It was a pretty big deal, and it was sold out. And like you know, I don't think at the time we realized how big it was going to be. I didn't even realize at the time where I was. I was just focused on doing that job. I was like, okay, this is what we need to get done today. This is what I'm going to focus on. So I didn't really have time to like take it all in and feel it and like you know like even think about it and realize how big it was. I just wanted to get that done. WrestleMania is a whole different ball game though, right? Because you're there for like the whole week doing access and doing all these interviews and media and like you see so many people before the show even starts. And then like on the day you're just like, oh shoot, like oh man, this is wow, like that ramp is so far. You have to change everything, like how you do your entrance, like how you do certain things. You have to change everything, you know, like the first pre-show ever was they tested it out. It was Miami, and I remember Miami is like very humid and it's outdoors. And I tried to do the springboard moonsault, and it's the first time ever in my life that I slipped. I just like fell back into the ring and I just jumped out, right? And Stephanie McMahon was like, "Ah!" But like you know, that's when I realized I was like, okay, Mania is like a different ball game. You have to think different. That's why we call it Mania moments, right? Everyone's working for that one little thing. It's just like, yeah, dude, I can't even explain to you. It's like it's the Super Bowl of wrestling. It's like the World Cup. You know, everything is just different. And you also realize when you get there like a week before, you check into the hotel, everybody stays in the same place. That's when you're like, wait, everybody's here, right? Like everybody and their families, even all the legends and their families, everybody that's going into the Hall of Fame, everyone that's been inducted to the Hall of Fame, like everybody is there. And that's when you realize too, like you see people that you grew up watching, you see like how big the spectacle actually is, and you see people from all over the world, you know. And on the day when you have to perform, you're like, oh man, like all my peers are watching me, all these people from all over the world. That's when like the nerves kick in. You're like, oh man, what do I get myself into now? But that's what makes it exciting, right? That's why we do this. That's like for those moments.
Yeah, and you know that kind of experience because me training and wrestling, me doing matches. Obviously, everybody, even the guys in IPW where I wrestle, that's their dream. You know, to wrestle on WrestleMania or to make it big somehow. You know, if you are wrestling, that should be your goal, in my opinion. Yes, some people can do it for fun. That's fine. But if you're really want to be a wrestler full time, that should be your goal. You know, to be able to be on WrestleMania and be able to do that kind of thing. But as the Nexus came to an end, And as kind of your career, your time in WWE was coming to an end, talk us through, you're being released and going to the Indies. Yeah.
Yeah, I was never released. I kind of quit. I remember they weren't using me, and I was sitting in catering, just sitting there every Monday and Tuesday. SmackDowns was Tuesdays back then. And I was just sitting there, and they weren't using me, and they weren't using me. And I just got into skydiving like earlier that year. And I was like, you know what? If they're not going to use me, I'm just going to leave the building. Nobody would even know. So I'd go skydiving. The one day I would just like not even go because I was like, they're not going to use me. I remember like they needed me for something, so I rushed to the building, and I had the skydiving goggles, like the print on my face. I was like, fuck, I hope nobody knows. I hope nobody notices. And like Seth Rollins is the only guy that notices. He like looks at me. He's like, you went skydiving, didn't you? And I was like, wow, how did you know that? He's like, dude, your face. So I would just like started leaving like early, and I would just like book my own flight home, and just like I was like, man, I just want to get back home, ride my motorcycle, go skydive. Yet it really sucked too, because like I pitched all these ideas, all these characters ideas, all these storylines, all these things, and nothing got used. So I was like, maybe my ideas aren't good. Maybe I'm just not really good at wrestling. You start doubting yourself, right? So I remember I was boarding the plane, and then they called me like, hey, we need you for this segment. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, oh, what do I tell them now? I was like on the spot. I was just like, tell them I quit. I'm going home. Bye. And I just put down the phone. I was like, shit, what did I do? I worked my whole life to get here, and now I just pulled this shit. And the next day they called me. They're like, why don't you just think about it? Take a week off. Monday you come back and we'll talk about it. And during that week, I really sat down and I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? Now I get to go to the Indies. I can go do the stuff that I always wanted to do. It really sucks because, my whole life I wanted to be on TV. I wanted to be in WWE. That's, like you said, that's why we do this. So it was one of the most difficult decisions I had to make in my life. It was incredibly difficult, but I was toying with it. And I was like, you know what? Let me put some feelers out there and see if I can book any cool matches. And, instantly I got booked like all my dream matches almost. So I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do for a little while. And, once I started doing that, I was like, okay, this was the right decision. But it still really sucks that I had to walk away from a dream. That's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, and when you went, that is a hard thing to do. And when you went on to the Indies, I think everyone kind of says this. Everyone that I spoke to, obviously I told you here, I spoke to Killer Cross at a convention, and I asked him a few questions. It was a huge honor speaking to him. One of my biggest moments in my channel. And his words, as you can see on the picture here, his words were, "They cut your legs out from underneath you." So it's a chance. He said it's a chance for me to perform the way I want to perform, be who I want to be. That was his exact words. So obviously you were Justin at this time. You weren't PJ Black. So being able to be PJ Black and being able to be yourself must have felt good. And being able to go and wrestle your legends and being able to be you, really, that was probably better for you. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. And it turned out to be a great decision. I wish I did it a little bit differently, not abruptly quit like this, and kept like a better contact and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, that was the best decision for me at the time. And that's life. That's how it happens. Maybe I should have played it like slightly different, but I'm not regretting any of that. I'm super happy how that turned out. And funny story, actually, too. You talk about Cross a lot. When he was trying to get into the business, I was doing my little indie stint, right? So he was living in Vegas, so I would teach him. He would call me randomly. I even forgot how we became friends, but he's just such a cool dude that he's got that presence, right? And I would like teach him some stuff. We'd go to the gym. I train him. Like he would do all these things, and that's cool to see that years later he kind of like made it. But he also didn't understand. I was trying to explain to him, like, look, when you get there, this is how it is. And like, I teach a lot of seminars these days, and that's one of the things I teach, because you teach like character development, wrestling, you teach all these things. I teach a segment on, I don't want to call it politics or psychology, but there is psychology. There's backstage psychology and in-ring psychology, and I actually teach that. And I remember like he was very interested in that part of the business, and like we spent a lot of time on that actually. He will never admit that now, but we spent a lot of time on that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Being back on the Indies, obviously, you weren't you weren't Justin Gabriel, you were PJ Black, and being able to be yourself again. Probably felt like a lot of weight off your shoulders as well, just being able to have fun again. But being on the
Yeah,
Indies,
and
you
also
mentioned,
like also I was PJ Black ever since 1995. People don't realize
yeah,
that, right? And then I was only Justin Gabriel for what, like 6 years. So I've been PJ Black for like 21 years, right? But most people know Justin Gabriel because he was on TV. So when I got to the Indies, I was like, okay, this is my goal. That like people remember PJ Black rather than Justin Gabriel. I
yeah.
don't know if I made that happen, but I had fun doing it.
Yeah, well, I do apologize. I kind of did make a big chunk about Justin Gabriel, but with you being PJ Black again, and what you said there, you got a lot of your dream matches, which is something I thought maybe you got a lot of your dream matches in WWE, but with you being on the Indies, what's been your favorite match?
Oh wow, the AJ match, which I mentioned, the Ricochet match too, was fantastic. If anyone could pull it up on YouTube, that was really good. Like I think even Ricochet was impressed because he didn't know who I was, right? Like he did a promo after, and he was like, "Wow, this guy!" Like that was my fondest memory of that match. It was a good match, but the promo he cut after like really got me. I was like, "Wow!" Like for this guy who I know in the future is going to be somebody, for him to say that, that was almost more meant more to me than anything else. But yeah, during that same stint, I wrestled Drew when he wasn't in the WWE, and then obviously everybody knows him. Um, who did who? Let me see. Like I had so many really good matches, like fun matches. I mean, there's just so many names to list. I mean, everybody that I worked my first year on the Indies was just like because you get booked differently. You get put in different matches. It's not like starting out. You're gonna get put against like completely different people. Like it's like it was super fun to be in that position.
And there's nothing like that, I suppose. Like when you finally get to be you again. Matt Cardona said it. Some of the guys go to the Indies just for the money again. Like I'm not going to name any names because this is a podcast and small world we live in. But there's a lot of guys who take bookings. A lot of wrestlers who do that, and just because they're legends, and they'll take the money from different wrestling promotions and still use their name, do the re-signature catchphrase or whatever they do. That would be it. Matt Cardona says, and a lot of other people say, you need to reinvent yourself, and that's exactly what you, Cross, Matt Cardona did. A lot of people just done it for the money. Former WWE superstar coming on to my promotion, but you reinvented yourself, which I find pretty cool.
Yeah, and thanks for noticing that. Like wrestling keeps evolving. It's completely different now than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, obviously 20 years ago. It's always evolving, and that a lot of people don't like that. And that those are these guys that you mentioned that just do it for the money. But a lot of us, we love this. To me, it's an art form. I get to express myself. I get to do these things and entertain people and like change people's lives. Like just I have little kids coming up to me. I'm like, wow, I didn't know you can do that. Or like the other day, this kid was like, wow, you still got it. I was like, dude, I never lost it. I just couldn't do this stuff on TV. Like it's a really cool feeling. And we're artists. Some of us are artists, and some of us are entertainers, and some of us are actual like fighters. And you have to kind of like adapt in this world. And that's what makes wrestling so unique, because it's not like any other sport. You can't explain it. It's not like, it's kind of like a soap opera, but not. It's kind of like a sport, but not. It's kind of like stunts, but it's not. It's like
Absolutely.
it's its own thing. Like you can't really
Yeah.
explain to people what it is. I think my dad had a really good phrase. He used to call it what do you say? He used to call it a stuntman's ballet. And I was like, yeah, that's so fitting actually. But yeah, it's such an awesome industry to be in, and it can be toxic at some times, but that's part of it. It's like a relation. It's like a what do you call those it's like an abusive relationship, right? Where you keep going back. That's like nothing's going to stop you from it. It doesn't matter. You have a good day, a bad day, you're going to keep going back, and you can have the worst match ever and be down on yourself. Next weekend you'll have an awesome match, and someone's who said Dusty actually said this, or maybe no, I forget, but somebody said this and it stuck with me for life. It said you're only as good as your last match. And I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's so true. Like, sometimes you get to the back, you're like, man, that wasn't as good as I thought it was. And always when you watch it back, it's always like sometimes it's better than you thought. Sometimes it's worse. Like sometimes you think, wow, that was really good. And you watch it back and like, because we're all perfectionists too. And it's an art form. So obviously art is subjective, and you're going to be your own worst critic always in any art form, right? It's not like in sports too, but this is like kind of sport, but also more art if you think about it. So it's rambling on about it, but I get so passionate and emotional
Yeah.
about wrestling.
Yeah, and so do I as well. That's why I started up this podcast. I'm normally quite a quiet person, not outside of this podcast, but when I get to talk about wrestling, I'm not a quiet person, and it's something I'm very passionate about as well. So I want to thank you very much for your time, but I want to bring in some comments quickly, just from the fans. Wrestling Insider asks, have you ever been to Ireland? What would it take to get you to a show here?
Yes, I've been to Ireland. I've actually wrestled in
OTT.
I've never wrestled in OTT. I've always wanted to, by the way. I would love to go wrestle there. If anybody wants to book me, I'm down. Totally down. You just tell me. DM me, send me an email, whatever. I've wrestled in 69 countries, I think. Yeah, Jamaica was 69 for me. I've wrestled all over the world, and this was all done through wrestling. Never had to pay for a ticket in my life. Been to 72, but wrestled in 69 countries. Most of it was WWE. A lot of it was African countries too, that a lot of guys don't get because so they've definitely been to Ireland. I've traveled through there. I've wrestled there with WWE. I've never done any indies there, so I'm definitely down for that if anybody else is down.
Yeah, it'd be really cool to get you over to Belfast as well. We're on our own show, Northern Ireland Pro Wrestling. If Slamdown, our next show Slamdown too. Just to promote this year, you can get your tickets for it at www.nipw.sumupstore.com. It's on Sunday the 6th of April. But yeah, it'd be really cool to get you over there as well, to Northern Ireland somehow, to get travelling. What else? So I'll bring in another comment here on it. So Mighty Molly asks, what's in your t-shirts, folks?
What's in your t-shirts, folks?
What, this one
or general? This one, this was a show I did in Australia. This is FCW, one of my favorite promotions, actually. This was the main event, and I don't know if you can see there. It was me and Famous B. I was just at the gym. It was like the first shirt I grabbed, and I was like, "Oh yeah, it's got a nice fit and everything." Like this company always has the coolest shirts. Shout out to Matt. He's probably never going to watch any of this stuff, but like, wow, that guy runs a good show, and I love going there to Australia. I teach a lot of seminars there. There's a lot of great up and coming talent down there, all over the world. Really, like wrestling is such a universal language, right? You go to these places where you never thought would watch wrestling or understand it, but you go to these places where they don't even speak English, but they understand wrestling, and that's another really cool thing about
it. And the t-shirt I'm wearing here isn't wrestling related. It's Guns N' Roses t-shirt. So my wrestling character is the Kid of Rock. So I'm normally coming in a Guns N' Roses t-shirt, a guitar, and a bandana. So I'm the Kid of Rock, Keaton Whiteside. So I would come out with that. So that's a t-shirt I would always wear.
I love that.
And then I've already asked that one. So Darren Whiteside asks, would you ever go back to WWE if the call came in?
Yeah, never say never, but I'm getting a little bit older now, and I struggle to. I don't think I'll be able to do that schedule again, but never say never. But yeah, at this stage in life, it'd be really hard to do it full time again. I really enjoy what I'm doing now, and just picking my bookings. Like I don't take a lot of bookings these days, even because I don't have to anymore. I've been doing this for 29 years of my life. I've dedicated. That's most of my life. I've dedicated to this business. And it's and now I get to pick where I want to go. Like I go to Australia quite often. I have France in the summer, but other than that, I hardly take any bookings in the US. And it's unless it's like they come to me with a cool match or a good little story that I can sink my teeth into, I'd be down to do that. But never say never. They wanted me to be a coach at NXT, and I was like, oh, that sounds like super fun because I love coaching. But then again, like just doing that full time, I'm like, wow, I'll get so bored of that.
Yeah, exactly. I see what you mean there. And there's another question I want to ask you before I bring in another one of our comments. Down where I wrestled in IPW, there's a faction called the New Era, and they're led by the general manager Chris Mercer. It's a really really cool new faction. All of them are heels. And they're all like they're of NIPW. They're coming in and they're taking away the four pillars of people who are there from the start. Having matches against them. So for these guys, what advice would you have to a new heel faction, to finally, get that to make an impact in the business?
Yeah, just have fun, like it sounds like they're already playing good heels and like getting the reaction from people. John Cena said this. He goes, whether it's a good reaction or a bad reaction, as long as you get a reaction, the worst thing that can happen is no reaction. People just sit on their hands. So sounds like those guys, I'll see if I can check it out online, but it sounds like they're doing a good job and just have fun. And keep it classy, keep it in the in the confinements of wrestling. Like, like sometimes we're trying to push the envelope, and you know what works and what doesn't. So whatever works, stick with that, and whatever doesn't work, obviously change that. And that's what's cool about this too. You keep evolving, you keep trying new things. Like it's a
Yeah, that's awesome advice, and I'll make sure to see that as well. So thanks so much for coming on. It's been an honor having you on. I have two more questions for you. So, what's next for PJ Black?
Oh man, like I said, I don't take a lot of bookings these days, but if something comes through that's super fun, I love going to the south of France in the summer. Like, wow, that's so awesome. I love working that promotion there. I love going to Australia. I love it, like anything international I'll take. If it's like something, uh, something that sounds like super fun. Like every once in a while I get that itch again. I'll watch like a SummerSlam or something, and I'm like getting that itch. I'm like, man, maybe I should go back on the road full time. I don't know if my body will be able to handle that. I mean, I obviously I will, but not like I used to be and do that 7 days a week. That's going to be really tough, and that's also a very hard pill to swallow, because it's like, man, aging really sucks. Like that's like literally the worst part of the life experience. It's like getting older and you're like, man, I can't do this anymore. I mean, I can probably still do it. I can get there and still perform at a really high level, but not 5 nights a week. Like that's just not going to happen. And that sucks. Like realizing that really, really like hit me hard, dude. It's like, man, I'm going to be one of those old farts.
Yeah, well, you've had quite an amazing career, more, and you got further than most people would have. Most people don't make it to WWE; they just stay in the Indies. But you became a three-time WWE Tag Team Champion, so you had a pretty good career from that. And what's the best piece of advice you could give to a young trainee wrestler starting out in wrestling?
Best advice, that's the best advice I ever got, and it's going to be different for different people. Dr. Tom told me, look, what's old is new and what's new is old. Go study those old tapes. You get ideas. You don't have to copy the characters or the moves or the phrases verbatim, but you always get ideas. Like I love watching Johnny Saint. I
Yeah,
love
same.
all those people from that era. I get so many little things that I use today and then I tweak. And like the people who also study that, they know where I get it from. Like, yeah, I'll do something. I did something on ROH TV, and Norman Smiley called me. He goes, "Hey, you got that from Cannonball or whatever, right?" And
Yeah,
I was like, "Yeah, that's exactly where I got it from." Like study the old stuff, the storylines, the character, like I mean, back in the, there wasn't so much storylines and stuff, right? But like that whole era of like Johnny Saint and like the Haystacks, that World of Sport, right? Like there's some
yep.
incredible wrestling there, and like moves that you never see ever again. Like you see stuff
Oh,
that
yeah.
Johnny Saint did, and nobody does that stuff. And then you can just bring one of those things back. So yeah, study the game, especially if you want to make it in this business and if you want to take this to the next level. But the 3 years that I tried to get signed, that's all I did. I went to the gym, studied tape. Went to the gym, studied tape. And it paid off. After 3 years, I got the contract. So if that's something you really want to do, go study the old stuff.
Yeah, even in my first match, I got a lot of inspiration from Johnny Saint. In my first match, I actually done the Russ Abbott, one of Johnny Saint's moves. Uh,
Nice.
so that was a really cool thing to do. But I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I know you've been on for a while here, and it's obviously was early in the morning when you actually came on. So thanks so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it. It's been an honor talking to you.
Oh man, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and I really enjoyed this conversation, man. And just keep going at this. You're gonna be successful if you have this much passion and drive for anything in life. Not necessarily wrestling, but anything in life. If you like, what's that saying? They say passion and hard work beats talent every day, right? And because wrestling is not like a real sport, like we've discussed, like the only thing that's gonna have you make this is that passion and drive. And I can already tell it's the first time I've ever spoken to you, but I can tell you got that, my friend. And like just
Yeah,
keep going. Well done, awesome. Thanks for having me. I know we've been trying to set this up for months, and we finally got
yeah,
to do it. So I'm really stoked.
yeah. It means a lot. Thanks so much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
So what a great episode we just had there with the legendary PJ Black. I think that's probably been one of the biggest interviews I've ever done. Now on the next Kayfabe with Keaton, I'm not too sure who's coming on next. We're meant to have a guest on, and we've rescheduled. So coming up next on Kayfabe with Keaton, make sure to stay in touch for my socials. You can check me on Facebook at Kayfabe Keaton to try to see what's coming up next. And now as for the next NIPW show, we'll have Slam Down 2 in the Grand Social in Bangor. So NIPW takes over Bangor with some of the best international talents like Johnny Evers and the best now homegrown Northern Irish talents like Stevie Fee, Sage Valentine, John McCann, and the Young Lion. So make sure not to miss that. And you can get your tickets for that at www.nipw.substore.com. So thank you everyone for watching, and hopefully we'll see you for the next one. Make sure to stay up to date on my socials to find out who we have coming up next. So thanks very much for watching, and bye for now.